Our group, which includes Ariana, Jesus, Logan, Giselle, Paris, and myself, were chosen to review Chapter 9's development. We hope you enjoy.
In this skit, we will go over the 3 main ways to score a country's HDI. These workers are a small part of a large agricultural-based labor force in a developing country called the primary sector. Most developing countries' GNI is obtained from the primary sector and the secondary sector, which is the process of assembling raw materials into goods. On the other hand, in developed countries, much of GNI is produced from the tertiary and quaternary sectors, or jobs that involve the provision of goods and collection of data. This evaluation of jobs corresponds with the country's decent standard of living, along with the state's income and economic structure and consumer goods. An example of a consumer item that varies in developed and developing countries is a computer. The number of internet users in a country are typically very high if the country is developed. If not, the access to knowledge is limited, so it's difficult to obtain enough computer technology.
Welcome back, Marie. Today we are learning about translation. Well, during translation, the cell uses information from messenger RNA to produce proteins.
Interesting.
Another important aspect of deciding a country's HDI score is its access to knowledge. The average years of schooling for a child in a developed country is 11, in contrast to 7 years around the world. Years of schooling is the number of years an average person over 25 has spent in school. A factor that defines learning space is the pupil-teacher ratio, which is twice as large in developing countries than developed countries. With a smaller pupil-teacher ratio, the literacy rate within the country is higher. The average literacy rate in developed countries is over 99%.
Logan Wilson, please come back. So you're here for the eyes, right?
Yeah.
What's been happening?
I've just been having a real sharp pain, Doc. I don't know what it is.
Okay, well, you play sports, right?
Yeah.
I might have to do something with it. Let me check your eyes.
Alright.
Ooh, nice color.
Thank you.
Alright. They do seem a little red. Let me check the symptoms of that.
Am I gonna go blind, Doc?
No, well, maybe in a few days. You might go blind and might hit death.
Really?
Yeah. Anything you want to tell me?
Then I only have 3 days to give the rest of the information.
Well, you better spit it out now, honey.
Alright. The last way to measure a country's HDI is the standards for a long, healthy life. The health indicator contributing to the HDI is life expectancy at birth. The average for MDCs is 80 to 68 in developing regions. The lowest is in sub-Saharan Africa at 55 years of life. Shorter life expectancy in developing regions is due to lack of wealth, access to public assistance to the sick, poor, disabled, elderly. The infant mortality rate is much higher in developing countries because of malnutrition, dehydration, and medicine for the newborn. Another cause of low health is a lack of trained professionals in the medical practice.
Well, I'm a doctor and found that quite interesting.
Really?
Really. Key issue 2 goes over the measures and trends in gender inequality in different developments. Things that halt the progression of women in development can be cultural and legal barricades, like religion and different laws in different LDCs and MDCs. The UN has not found a single country in the world where women are treated equally as men. The UN also states that this inequality is a major key that prohibits the advancement of a country's reaching a higher level of development. Gender inequality is measured by the UN using an index called the Gender Inequality Index, or GII for short. This procedure is performed combining the multiple measures like empowerment, labor, and reproductive health. The GII is the newest technique that replaced other indexes like the Gender-Related Development Index and Gender Empowerment Measure. The higher the GII, the higher the inequality numbers are between men and women. In this case, 0 means women and men are equal, and 1.0 means that women are treated horribly in all measures. When it comes to the GII and LDCs, the score is high. The developing countries that have high scores and inequality are Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, Central Asia, and Southwest Asia. The measure that is the contributor to this would be the reproductive health factor out of the 3 measures used by the UN. Usually countries with high HDIs have low GIIs.
Labor force. The female labor force participation rate is described as the percentage of women holding full-time jobs outside their home. Women in developed countries tend to usually have full-time jobs outside their homes. In developed countries, it's stated that every 100 men, there are 75 women in workforce. In the developing countries, it's 65. Developing countries like Southwest Asia and North Africa tend to have only 35 women out of 100 men to participate in workforce. However, an exception is made with Sub-Saharan Africa. This region has been proven to have the lowest HDI, but has the world's highest female labor force with 77 women for every 100 men. The women there usually hold jobs in service or agriculture.
Empowerment in this context technically means the ability of women to accomplish improvements in their own statuses. The 2 improvements are economic or political power. Empowerment is measured by the GII in 2 ways: the percentage of seats held by women in the national legislature and the percentage of women who have completed high school. Usually in every country, the percentage of women who hold positions in political power are usually lower than men. Usually more women vote for the men. However, not one country has a national parliament of Congress, with the majority being women. Europe has the highest percentage, 1 out of 4, of women in the national parliaments. In the US, 1 out of 6 of the US Senate and the House of Representatives are women members. The lowest are in Southwest Asia and North Africa. Now, the second measure in empowerment is high school completion. In North America, girls are usually the ones to complete their years of high school than boys. In Europe, boys have a slight edge. In developing countries, usually boys graduate.
Gender inequality trends. Trends that have occurred in almost every country are the gender inequality rates have been declining since 1990s. Improvements have been made in North Africa and Southwest Asia. There is an exception to the GII increasing in developed countries like the US. 2 key points that usually are taken into account when it comes to countries with high HDIs and low GIIs, like the US, are reproductive rights and the low percentage of women in the national legislature. An example of this maternal mortality rate has been higher in the US than in other developed countries such as Canada and Europe.
Born in mid-latitude countries. China supplies half the world's coal, half by half. The US has about 4 of those earths. Natural gas, or 1/3 of production is in Russia. Most reserves are in Southwest Asia. Southwest Asia, North Africa, and Central Asia. And petroleum lies beneath the seas, such as Persian Gulf, or Persian Gulf.
today to discuss both of your paths to development. Of course, I'm talking about India's self-sufficiency path versus South Korea's international trade path. India, will you please go first?
Gladly. As a country, we choose the self-sufficiency path to control our own economy by encouraging domestic production of goods, discouraging foreign ownership of businesses and resources, and protecting our citizens' businesses from international competition. We have set barriers on trade to ensure we stay on the self-sufficiency path. As a nation, we have passed laws restricting the number of goods that can be sold in India by a foreign company, and not allowing Indian money to be converted to any other currencies.
All right, thank you. Now, South Korea, can you share your plan for international trade?
Yes, our country has chosen the international trade because we believe it will help our economy more to open ourselves up to foreign investment in the international market. We of course may lack the natural resources, but we have found great success on focusing on producing a great deal of manufactured goods. We focus mainly on the items like clothing and electronics to export, and low labor costs allow us to sell these products inexpensively to countries with more capital. Because of that, South Korea and the other members of the four Asian dragons are now considered developed countries.
That's true, but when it comes to that path, there are three main challenges: uneven resource distribution, market decline, and the increased dependence on developing countries. All three of these challenges could destroy a country.
But think about the challenges for India. If they protect inefficient businesses, they will have little motivation to improve quality, reduce prices, and increase production. Also, entrepreneurs will find that struggling to produce goods or offer services is much less profitable than illegally importing and exporting goods.
I agree. The international trade path has been used by developed countries in Europe, North America, and Japan. It is obviously far more efficient, but we all face issues in India. That's why we have a structural adjustment program, which includes economic goals, strategies for achieving objectives, and external financing requirements to help developing countries like yourself. You can also turn to loans from the World Bank and IMF.
I'll have to discuss this with my government officials.
Hello.